Beneath the waves of the world's most renowned hunting grounds, shark attacks unfold with terrifying speed and ferocity. From murky rivers to open ocean dives, these apex predators strike without warning, ripping through metal, flesh, and silence alike. Each encounter is a chilling reminder of nature's raw power, where the difference between thrill and tragedy is often a single heartbeat. In this video, you'll witness 6 intense, real-life shark attack stories, harrowing moments of fear, fight, and fragile survival. From capsized rescue boats to failed cage dives, expect non-stop suspense from calm waters to carnage. The waters off Gansbaai, South Africa, had earned their fearsome reputation over decades. Known locally as the Great White Highway, this stretch of ocean near the Western Cape Province attracted massive predators seeking the abundant seal colonies that dotted the rocky coastline. Marine biologists had long documented the area's unique geography, where the cold Benguela Current met warmer waters, creating an ecosystem that supported one of the world's densest populations of great white sharks. The jagged underwater topography, with its sudden drop-offs and kelp forests, provided perfect hunting grounds for apex predators that could grow beyond 20 feet in length. On the morning of July 8, 2025, an urgent distress call was made from the South African coast, signaling an emergency at sea. A local fisherman named Bartholomeus Hendricks had become stranded when his engine failed approximately 3 nautical miles from shore. His small fishing vessel had begun taking on water in the increasingly choppy conditions, and radio contact indicated he was in immediate danger of sinking. The rescue station in Kleinbaai quickly assembled a 4-man crew aboard their rigid inflatable rescue craft, designated as Rescue 7. Leading the rescue operation was Quinton Rasmussen, a veteran marine rescue specialist with 15 years of experience navigating these treacherous waters. His crew consisted of Demetrius van der Merwe, a skilled boat operator known for his ability to handle vessels in rough seas; Leander Botha, a certified paramedic who had treated countless maritime injuries; and Xavier Kukamore, a junior rescue technician eager to prove himself during his first major operation. The men understood the urgency of their mission, as weather conditions were deteriorating rapidly with swells building to over 6 feet. The rescue boat cut through the turbulent waters at maximum speed, its powerful twin outboard engines straining against the increasing wind and waves. Rasmussen maintained radio contact with the stranded fishermen while scanning the horizon for any sign of the disabled vessel. The crew had performed similar rescues dozens of times, but the combination of rough seas and the area's notorious shark population always added an element of danger that kept even experienced rescuers on edge. After 20 minutes of searching, van der Merwe spotted Hendricks waving frantically from his partially submerged fishing boat. The rescue craft approached carefully, with Botha preparing medical equipment while Kukamore readied the recovery lines. Rasmussen noted that the fisherman appeared uninjured but was clearly exhausted from fighting to keep his vessel afloat. The rescue team began maneuvering into position to transfer Hendricks to safety when their world exploded into chaos. The first impact came without warning. A massive great white shark, estimated later to be over 15 feet in length and weighing close to 3,000 pounds, slammed into the starboard side of the rescue boat with the force of a freight train. The collision sent a shockwave through the fiberglass hull, and all 4 men were thrown violently across the deck. Rasmussen barely had time to process what had happened before the enormous predator struck again, this time from beneath. The shark's massive head breached the surface, revealing rows of triangular teeth, each measuring over 2 inches in length. Its black eyes showed no emotion as it clamped down on the boat's inflatable collar, puncturing the air chambers with a sharp hissing sound. Van der Merwe scrambled for the radio to call for backup, but the shark's third attack lifted the entire bow of the boat clear out of the water. The vessel flipped completely, hurling all 4 rescuers into the frigid Atlantic Ocean. The water temperature shocked their systems as they surfaced, gasping and disoriented. Rasmussen felt the immediate danger of hypothermia setting in, but his training kicked in as he began calling out to locate his crew members. Botha had managed to grab a floating equipment bag, while Kukamore was struggling to stay afloat without a life vest. Van der Merwe had suffered a gash to his forehead during the capsize and was bleeding into the water. The great white circled the men with predatory precision, its dorsal fin cutting through the swells like a knife. Marine biologists would later theorize that the shark had been attracted by the boat's engine vibrations, mistaking the rescue craft for a wounded seal. The blood from van der Merwe's head injury only intensified the predator's interest as it began tightening its circular patrol around the helpless humans. The first attack came swift and brutal. The shark targeted Kokomor, its powerful jaws clamping down on his left thigh with crushing force. The young rescue technician screamed as the predator's teeth punctured muscle and scraped against bone. Rasmussen and Botha immediately began splashing frantically, creating as much noise and disturbance as possible to confuse the shark's sensory systems. Before Kokomor could be pulled underwater, the shark released him and turned its attention to Botha. The paramedic barely had time to raise his arm in defense before the great white's jaws closed around his shoulder. The force of the bite dislocated his shoulder joint while the shark's razor-sharp teeth tore through his wetsuit and into the flesh beneath. Botha fought desperately, punching at the shark's snout with his free hand while the others continued their frantic splashing. The commotion had not gone unnoticed. The crew of a nearby commercial fishing vessel had heard the rescue boat's engines go silent and had been monitoring their radio frequency. Captain Johannes Pieterse immediately altered course toward the last known position when he heard the men's desperate calls for help over the emergency channel. His powerful fishing trawler could be seen approaching rapidly from the north, black smoke pouring from its diesel engines as it ran at maximum speed. The shark made one final pass at van der Merwe, grazing his leg with its teeth before the approaching vessel's massive engines apparently disturbed its hunting pattern. The predator vanished beneath the surface as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving the four men floating in bloodied water with serious injuries but miraculously still alive. Pieterse's crew quickly deployed rescue lines and hauled the battered men aboard their vessel. Emergency medical treatment began immediately as the fishing boat raced toward the nearest hospital. All four rescuers survived their ordeal, though they required extensive surgery and months of rehabilitation. The incident served as a stark reminder of the ocean's unpredictable power and the constant dangers faced by those who make their living on these shark-infested waters off the South African coast. The north shore of Maui had witnessed countless nocturnal adventures over the decades, but few locations on Earth offered such a perfect combination of consistent waves and lurking danger. This stretch of Hawaiian coastline, where the Pacific Ocean met volcanic rock formations carved by millennia of erosion, created ideal conditions for both surfing and hunting. The area's unique bathymetry featured steep underwater drop-offs that allowed large pelagic species to approach surprisingly close to shore under the cover of darkness. Marine researchers had documented how tiger sharks, in particular, used these depths as hunting corridors, rising from the abyss to patrol the shallows where unsuspecting prey might venture. In October 2019, James Kavanaugh had developed an unusual obsession with night surfing that concerned his friends and family. The 28-year-old software engineer from Portland had relocated to Hawaii 6 months earlier, seeking adventure and escape from his corporate lifestyle. His apartment overlooked the very beach where he spent most nights. Drawn by the ethereal quality of moonlit waves and the solitude that darkness provided, local surfers had warned him repeatedly about the increased shark activity after sunset, but James dismissed their concerns as superstition, convinced that his experience and skill would protect him from any potential danger. The particular evening that would change his life forever began like many others. James had finished a late dinner and checked the surf report, noting favorable conditions with clean 4-foot waves and light offshore winds. The moon was nearly full, casting sufficient light across the water to make night surfing feasible without artificial illumination. He waxed his 7-foot board methodically, a ritual that had become almost meditative over his months in Hawaii. The beach was completely deserted, which suited his preference for solitary sessions away from the crowds that dominated daylight hours. James paddled out through the lineup with practiced efficiency, his movements creating minimal disturbance in the phosphorescent water. The ocean felt different at night, more mysterious and alive with unseen activity. He could hear the breathing of monk seals on nearby rocks and occasionally glimpse the silver flash of flying fish breaking the surface. After catching several waves, he found himself drifting further from shore than usual, drawn by larger sets breaking on the outer reef. The isolation felt complete and intoxicating, heightening his senses and connection to the ocean environment. 20 feet below the surface, a 14-foot tiger shark had been tracking the rhythmic splashing of James's paddle strokes for several minutes. The massive predator, weighing over 800 pounds, possessed the distinctive dark stripes that gave its species their common name. Tiger sharks were known for their opportunistic hunting behavior and powerful jaws capable of crushing turtle shells and whale bones. This particular individual had been patrolling the area for weeks, following the scent trails left by migrating humpback whales and feeding on the abundant marine life that congregated around the offshore reefs. The attack came with explosive suddenness that defied comprehension. James was sitting upright on his board, scanning the horizon for incoming sets, when the tiger shark erupted from the depths like a missile. The predator's massive head broke the surface first, water cascading from its broad snout as its jaws opened to reveal rows of serrated teeth. Time seemed suspended as James registered the shark's distinctive markings and cold, black eyes before impact. The tiger shark's jaws clamped down on James's left thigh with crushing force, the teeth penetrating through his wetsuit and deep into muscle tissue. The initial bite generated over 4,000 pounds of pressure per square inch, easily fracturing his femur, while the shark's powerful neck muscles began the characteristic head-shaking motion used to tear flesh from prey. James felt himself being pulled underwater as the predator attempted to drag him into the depths where it could finish feeding without interference. Panic and adrenaline flooded James's system as he fought desperately for his life. His survival instincts overcame the excruciating pain as he began punching the shark's snout with both fists, targeting the sensitive ampullae of Lorenzini that detect electrical fields. The shark's sandpaper-like skin tore at his knuckles, but he continued striking while simultaneously grabbing at its head to prevent being pulled deeper underwater. The struggle created a violent disturbance on the surface, with blood beginning to cloud the moonlit water around them. The tiger shark maintained its grip for what felt like an eternity, but was likely less than 30 seconds. James's desperate fighting and the unfamiliar texture of his wetsuit apparently confused the predator, which had expected the soft flesh of its usual prey. Marine biologists would later explain that tiger sharks often release unfamiliar objects after initial contact, particularly when encountering unexpected resistance. The shark suddenly opened its jaws and began to circle James, who was now bleeding heavily and struggling to stay afloat. On the beach, a group of late-night campers had heard the commotion and splashing over the sound of breaking waves. Marcus Chen, a marine biology student, immediately recognized the signs of a possible shark attack and began shouting instructions to James while his companions called emergency services. The group used their flashlights toward the water, creating light patterns that may have helped deter the tiger shark from making additional passes. James summoned his remaining strength to paddle desperately toward shore, his damaged leg trailing uselessly behind him. Each stroke sent waves of pain through his body, but the sight of the beach lights ahead drove him forward. The tiger shark made one final approach before disappearing into the depths, apparently satisfied that its prey was no longer a threat. James caught a small wave that carried him into waist-deep water, where the campers waded out to help drag him onto the sand. Emergency medical teams arrived within 15 minutes and immediately began treating James's severe lacerations and blood loss. His thigh bore the unmistakable crescent-shaped bite pattern of a tiger shark, with puncture wounds that required over 200 stitches to close. Despite his injuries, James had survived an encounter that easily could have proven fatal. His experience served as a sobering reminder of the risks inherent in night surfing, particularly in waters known for large predatory sharks. The Brisbane River system in Queensland, Australia, had long been recognized by marine biologists as one of the most dangerous waterways in the world for shark encounters. Unlike most shark species that required saltwater environments, bull sharks possess the unique physiological ability to regulate their internal salt content, allowing them to travel hundreds of kilometers upstream into freshwater rivers and lakes. This adaptation made them particularly dangerous to unsuspecting recreational users who assumed that river environments were safe from shark attacks. The murky, sediment-laden waters provided perfect camouflage for these aggressive predators, which could grow to over 11 feet in length and weigh more than 400 pounds. In March 2017, Mike Thornberry had planned what he believed would be a peaceful fishing expedition with his 12-year-old son Camden and longtime friend Gareth Pemberton. The 42-year-old construction foreman had grown up along Queensland's coast and considered himself experienced in reading water conditions and potential dangers. However, his knowledge was primarily focused on ocean fishing, and he underestimated the unique risks posed by the river system's brackish environment. The trio had selected a remote section of the river known locally for its abundant flathead and bream populations. approximately 30 kilometers upstream from the river mouth. The fishing spot they chose featured a deep bend, where the current had carved out a natural hole that typically held large fish. Ancient eucalyptus trees lined the banks, their gnarled roots extending into the water and creating perfect hiding spots for various species. Mike had discovered this location years earlier and had always enjoyed success here, though he had never ventured into the water itself. The morning started promisingly, with Camden successfully landing several small fish while the adults worked the deeper sections with heavier tackle. Pemberton, a veteran angler in his own right, had positioned himself on a fallen log that extended into the river, giving him access to the deepest part of the hole. His knowledge of local fishing conditions was extensive, and he had warned Mike about the occasional presence of bull sharks in the river system, though neither man took the threat seriously. The water appeared calm and inviting, with gentle ripples disturbed only by jumping fish and the occasional waterbird diving for prey. The morning's fishing had been unusually productive, with all three anglers landing respectable catches. Mike decided to wade into the shallow water near the bank to retrieve a lure that had become snagged on submerged timber. The water temperature was comfortable and the bottom felt solid beneath his feet as he carefully worked his way toward the obstruction. Camden watched from the bank, excited to see his father recover the expensive lure that had been producing consistent strikes throughout the morning. The attack occurred with terrifying suddenness in water barely 4 feet deep. A massive bull shark, likely measuring over 10 feet in length, exploded from the murky depths and clamped its powerful jaws around Mike's right leg just above the knee. The impact knocked him completely off balance as the shark's weight and momentum drove him underwater. Bull sharks were notorious for their aggressive temperament and tenacious bite, often refusing to release prey once their jaws had locked onto a target. Camden's screams pierced the morning air as he watched his father disappear beneath the muddy water in a violent swirl of foam and blood. Pemberton immediately dropped his fishing rod and grabbed the loaded rifle he always carried for protection against aggressive crocodiles, another danger common to Queensland's river systems. The shark's dorsal fin broke the surface as it attempted to drag Mike toward deeper water, providing Pemberton with a clear target for his intervention. Mike fought desperately underwater, his lungs burning as he punched and clawed at the shark's broad head. The predator's sandpaper-like skin tore at his hands, but adrenaline numbed the pain as his survival instincts took control. Bull sharks possess some of the strongest bite forces in the animal kingdom, capable of generating over 1,500 pounds of pressure per square inch. The crushing pain in his leg was overwhelming, but Mike managed to grab the shark's snout and push his thumb toward its eye socket. Pemberton's rifle shot cracked across the water just as Mike's head broke the surface, gasping for air. The bullet struck the water inches from the shark's head, the impact and noise apparently startling the predator enough to loosen its grip momentarily. Mike used this brief opportunity to break free and begin a desperate crawl toward the bank, his damaged leg trailing behind him and leaving a crimson trail in the muddy water. The bull shark made one additional pass, its aggressive nature driving it to pursue the wounded prey. However, Pemberton's continued shouting and splashing, combined with Camden's terrified screams from the bank, seemed to confuse the predator's hunting instincts. The shark circled briefly before disappearing back into the depths, leaving Mike to struggle the final few feet to safety with Pemberton's assistance. The extent of Mike's injuries became apparent as they dragged him onto the muddy bank. The bull shark's teeth had created deep puncture wounds throughout his leg, with several lacerations extending down to the bone. Pemberton immediately applied pressure to the worst bleeding, while Camden called emergency services on his father's mobile phone. The boy's quick thinking and detailed location information would prove crucial in getting medical assistance to their remote location. The rescue helicopter arrived within 45 minutes, but Mike had already lost significant blood and was showing signs of shock. Paramedics worked frantically to stabilize his condition before the flight to Brisbane's trauma center, where orthopedic surgeons spent 6 hours repairing the damage to his leg. The attack had fractured his tibia and severed several major muscle groups, requiring multiple surgeries and months of rehabilitation. Mike's recovery was complicated by infection and nerve damage, but he gradually regained most of the function in his leg. The psychological impact on both father and son was significant, with Camden requiring counseling to overcome his fear of water activities. Pemberton's quick thinking and accurate shooting had undoubtedly saved Mike's life, though the incident left all three men with a profound respect for the hidden dangers lurking in Australia's river systems. The attack served as a stark reminder that bull sharks could appear in environments where people least expected them, turning peaceful recreational activities into life-threatening encounters. The coastal waters of Durban, South Africa had always been notorious for their unpredictable currents and dangerous marine life. In the summer of 2018, a popular beach drew thousands of tourists, despite local warnings about increased shark activity following unusual weather patterns that had driven baitfish closer to shore. Sarah McKinney had been working as a lifeguard along this treacherous stretch of coastline for nearly 8 years. Her reputation for fearless rescues had earned her respect among both colleagues and beachgoers. The 32-year-old former competitive swimmer possessed an intimate knowledge of the ocean's moods and dangers, having grown up in the nearby township where stories of shark encounters were passed down through generations. That particular Tuesday afternoon, the beach buzzed with activity as families enjoyed the warm weather. Sarah maintained her vigilant watch from the elevated lifeguard tower, scanning the waters through her binoculars. The red warning flags fluttered in the offshore breeze, indicating hazardous swimming conditions, yet several tourists had ventured beyond the designated safe zones. Around 3 o'clock, Sarah spotted a middle-aged man struggling approximately 200 meters from shore. The swimmer appeared to be caught in a rip current, his arms flailing desperately as he fought against the relentless pull of the tide. Without hesitation, Sarah grabbed her rescue board and sprinted toward the water, her years of training taking over as she paddled powerfully through the choppy waves. The distance closed rapidly as Sarah navigated through the swells, her focus entirely on reaching the distressed swimmer. She called out reassuring words, telling the man to remain calm and stop fighting the current. The rescue seemed routine until she was within 20 meters of her target. The attack came without warning. A short-fin mako shark, measuring nearly 10 feet in length, erupted from the depths like a torpedo. The predator's incredible speed gave Sarah no time to react, as powerful jaws clamped down on her left forearm with crushing force. The initial shock numbed her senses momentarily before excruciating pain exploded through her arm. The mako shook its head violently from side to side, its razor-sharp teeth tearing through muscle and sinew. Sarah could feel her bones grinding against each other as the shark's grip tightened. Blood began clouding the water around them, creating a crimson halo that expanded rapidly in the current. Instinct took over as Sarah drove her right fist repeatedly into the shark's snout, one of its most sensitive areas. Each blow seemed to have little effect on the determined predator, which continued its savage assault. Desperation fueled her strength as she kicked at the shark's gills with her free leg, targeting another vulnerable spot. The commotion attracted immediate attention from the beach. Lifeguards and beachgoers began shouting and splashing at the water's edge, creating enough noise and movement to momentarily distract the mako. This brief interruption provided Sarah with the opportunity she needed. Summoning every ounce of remaining strength, she delivered a final, powerful punch to the shark's eye. The mako finally released its grip and disappeared beneath the surface as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Sarah floating in bloodied water with her mangled arm pressed against her chest. Fellow lifeguards reached her within minutes, hauling her onto a rescue boat as she fought to remain conscious. The man she had initially set out to save had managed to reach safety during the chaos, pulled to shore by other rescue personnel. Emergency medical teams rushed Sarah to the nearest hospital, where surgeons worked for hours to repair the extensive damage to her arm. Multiple tendons had been severed and several bones fractured, but the limb was saved. The attack left her with permanent nerve damage and limited mobility in her left hand. Despite her injuries, Sarah returned to lifeguard duty 6 months later, though she never again ventured beyond the shallow patrol zones. The encounter had taught her that even experienced ocean professionals could become victims of the sea's most efficient predators in mere seconds. The waters surrounding Seal Island, located in False Bay near Cape Town, South Africa, have established themselves as the premier destination for great white shark cage diving expeditions worldwide. This small rocky outcrop, measuring barely 400 meters in length, supported a colony of over 60,000 Cape fur seals that provided a reliable food source for the massive predators patrolling the surrounding waters. The island's strategic position, where deep ocean channels met shallow feeding areas, created perfect hunting conditions for great whites that could exceed 20 feet in length and weigh over 4,000 pounds. Marine researchers had documented the area's unique shark behavior, including the spectacular breaching attacks that occurred when predators ambushed seals from below. In August 2012, Anna Kowalski and her husband Mark had traveled from their home in Warsaw, Poland, to fulfill a lifelong dream of encountering great white sharks in their natural environment. The 43-year-old museum curator and her marine biologist husband had spent months researching cage diving operators, ultimately selecting a company with an established safety record and experienced crew. Their chosen operator, Ocean Predator Expeditions, had been conducting cage diving tours for over 8 years without a serious incident, using reinforced aluminum cages designed to withstand the impact of even the largest sharks. The morning of their scheduled dive dawned clear and calm, with excellent visibility and minimal wind that created ideal conditions for both shark activity and underwater observation. Captain Willem Steenberg, a veteran of over 2,000 cage diving expeditions, briefed the 12 tourists aboard his vessel about safety protocols and what to expect during their underwater encounter. The crew had already deployed the customary mixture of fish oil and blood that would attract sharks to the diving site, following established procedures that had proven successful countless times. Anna and Mark entered the first cage together, their excitement barely contained as they adjusted their diving masks and breathing apparatus. The cage measured approximately 8 feet in length and 6 feet in width, constructed from 3-inch aluminum bars that were designed to prevent shark entry while providing unobstructed viewing opportunities. The couple had been assigned to the cage with 2 other divers, but equipment problems had delayed their companions, leaving Anna and Mark alone for the initial descent. The first great white appeared within 15 minutes of the cage, reaching its operating depth of 12 feet below the surface. The magnificent predator, estimated at 16 feet in length, glided past the cage with casual grace, providing the tourist with spectacular photographic opportunities. Mark, whose professional background allowed him to appreciate the shark's perfect adaptation to its environment, was particularly impressed by the animal's size and apparent health. The second shark to arrive was significantly larger and more aggressive in its approach to the cage. This massive female, later estimated at 19 feet in length, had likely been attracted by the scent trail and the presence of the smaller male. Great white sharks were known to establish temporary hierarchies around feeding opportunities, with larger individuals typically dominating access to food sources. The cage diving operation had encountered similar situations previously, with multiple sharks present simultaneously, creating more dynamic but still manageable viewing conditions. The tragedy began when the large female great white attempted to investigate the bait that had been positioned near the cage. The shark's approach angle brought her massive head into direct contact with the cage's corner joint, where repeated impacts from previous expeditions had created microscopic stress fractures in the aluminum framework. The predator's initial contact with the cage appeared routine, but her continued investigation and increasingly aggressive movements began to test the structural integrity of the enclosure. Mark was the first to notice the slight movement in the cage's framework as the great white pressed against the bars with her enormous bulk. He attempted to signal the surface crew by pulling on the emergency line, but the shark's movements were creating too much disturbance for clear communication. Anna remained focused on photographing the encounter, unaware of the developing structural crisis that would soon transform their dream experience into a nightmare. The cage failure occurred with sudden catastrophic violence. The corner joint, weakened by thousands of hours of saltwater exposure and repeated shark impacts, finally gave way under the pressure of the massive great white's investigation. 3 bars separated from their connecting hardware, creating an opening large enough for the shark's head to penetrate the supposedly secure enclosure. The great white's entry into the cage was driven more by curiosity than predatory intent, but the confined space and presence of unfamiliar objects triggered defensive behavior patterns that proved deadly. Anna found herself trapped in the corner as the shark's massive head filled the limited space, her husband's desperate attempts to pull her away hampered by the lack of maneuvering room and the predator's thrashing movements. The attack lasted less than 30 seconds, but the great white's powerful jaws and razor-sharp teeth clamped down on Anna with crushing force. Mark, paralyzed by shock, watched helplessly as the massive predator seized his wife in its jaws. The great white's thrashing movements within the confined space were violent and chaotic, blood clouding the water as the shark's primitive instincts took over. In a final, terrifying display of its raw power, The great white backed out of the damaged cage opening, taking Anna with it as it vanished into the depths below. Mark's anguished screams carried clearly to the surface, where crew members were frantically working to raise the compromised cage, but there was nothing they could do. The ocean had swallowed both predator and victim, leaving only a trail of bubbles and blood to mark where they had disappeared. Captain Steenberg and his crew managed to raise the damaged cage within 2 minutes of the structural failure, pulling Mark from the bloodied water. Though physically unharmed, he was in complete psychological shock, his mind struggling to process the horrific scene he had just witnessed. Anna had vanished completely, taken by the great white into the dark depths where no rescue was possible. The immediate search efforts proved futile. The great white had disappeared into the deep channels surrounding Seal Island, and despite extensive diving operations over the following days, no trace of Anna was ever recovered. The incident prompted immediate industry-wide reviews of cage construction standards and diving safety protocols. Mark's testimony to investigators given while he was still in severe psychological trauma provided crucial information about the sequence of events that led to the tragedy. His detailed but harrowing account helped establish new manufacturing standards for shark cage construction and operator protocols for equipment inspection. The incident remained the only fatality in the cage diving industry's history at that location, serving as a sobering reminder that even the most carefully planned encounters with apex predators carried inherent risks that could never be completely eliminated. The remote waters of the Indian Ocean, roughly 400 kilometers southeast of Mauritius, had claimed countless vessels over the centuries. These treacherous seas, known for their unpredictable weather patterns and isolation from major shipping routes, offered little hope for survivors of maritime disasters. The region's history was littered with wreckage from merchant ships, fishing vessels, and even military craft that had underestimated the ocean's fury. Local maritime authorities maintained detailed records of over 200 documented shipwrecks in the area dating back to the 18th century, when Dutch and Portuguese trading vessels first began navigating these waters regularly. The underwater topography contributed significantly to the area's dangerous reputation. Steep oceanic trenches plunged to depths exceeding 4,000 meters, creating unpredictable current patterns that could trap vessels in circular motion for hours. Weather systems often developed rapidly due to the contrast between warm surface waters and cold, deep currents, giving mariners little time to prepare for sudden changes in conditions. In March 2016, the area experienced one of its most violent storm systems in decades, with winds exceeding 60 knots and waves reaching heights of 12 meters. Alex Thornfield had been working as a marine engineer aboard the cargo vessel Sunset Dreams for nearly 3 years. The 41-year-old from Newcastle had developed a deep respect for the ocean's power during his maritime career, having weathered numerous storms across various shipping routes. His father had been a fisherman, who instilled in him both love and fear of the sea from an early age, sharing tales of sudden squalls that could transform calm waters into death traps within minutes. Before joining the Merchant Marine, Alex had served briefly in the Royal Navy, where he learned emergency survival techniques that would prove invaluable during his ordeal. His technical background in diesel engines and hydraulic systems made him particularly valuable to smaller cargo operations that couldn't afford specialized engineering crews. The Sunset Dreams represented exactly this type of operation, running supplies between minor ports that larger shipping companies deemed unprofitable. His expertise in engine maintenance made him invaluable to the small crew of 8 men who transported goods between East African ports. The storm struck without adequate warning during the early morning hours of March 15th. Weather monitoring equipment had malfunctioned 2 days earlier, leaving the crew to rely on outdated forecasts. Captain Rodriguez made the fateful decision to continue their course toward Port Louis, rather than seek shelter, believing they could outrun the approaching system. By dawn, mountainous waves were crashing over the vessel's deck as hurricane-force winds battered the superstructure. The engine room flooded rapidly when a massive wave breached the cargo hold, and Alex found himself fighting to keep the bilge pumps operational. His efforts proved futile as the Sunset Dreams began listing heavily to starboard. The order to abandon ship came at 7:30 in the morning. Alex grabbed a life jacket and managed to reach the deck just as another enormous wave swept across the vessel. The impact threw him overboard along with several pieces of debris, including a large section of wooden decking that would prove crucial to his survival. Within minutes, the Sunset Dreams disappeared beneath the churning waters, taking 5 crew members with her. Alex clung desperately to the floating debris as the storm continued its assault, waves repeatedly submerging him as he fought to maintain his grip. The remaining 2 crew members had vanished in the chaos, leaving him alone in the vast expanse of hostile ocean. The storm finally subsided by evening, but Alex's ordeal was far from over. Exhaustion had begun to set in, and a deep gash on his leg from the initial impact was bleeding steadily into the water. As darkness fell, the true terror of his situation became apparent when he noticed the distinctive white-tipped fins circling in the moonlight. The oceanic white-tip shark measured approximately 11 feet in length, its bronze-colored body moving with predatory grace through the calm waters. These open-ocean predators were known for their persistence and aggression toward shipwreck survivors, often called the most dangerous sharks in the world by marine biologists. Unlike their coastal cousins, oceanic white-tips had evolved specifically for life in the deep ocean, developing an opportunistic feeding strategy that made them particularly deadly to humans stranded far from shore. The species had earned its fearsome reputation during World War II, when numerous accounts emerged of white-tips attacking survivors of torpedoed vessels in the Pacific and Atlantic theaters. Their distinctive white-tipped fins served as a warning sign to experienced sailors, who knew that encounters with these sharks in open water rarely ended well for humans. The predators possessed an unusual combination of curiosity and aggression, often investigating potential prey for extended periods before launching coordinated attacks. The shark began its methodical approach around midnight, circling closer with each pass as it tested the waters for signs of weakness. Alex tried to remain motionless, hoping to avoid triggering an attack, but his bleeding leg continued to attract the predator's attention. The strike came suddenly. The white tip lunged upward, its powerful jaws clamping down on Alex's right calf with tremendous force. Needle-sharp teeth punctured muscle and scraped against bone as the shark attempted to drag him away from the debris. Pain shot through his entire body as he felt his flesh tearing. Panic gave way to determination as Alex realized his only chance of survival lay in fighting back. He drove his fists repeatedly into the shark's snout while kicking frantically with his free leg. The white tip maintained its grip, shaking its head violently in an attempt to disorient its prey. In desperation, Alex managed to grab the shark's pectoral fin and twist his body, forcing the predator into an awkward position. This unexpected maneuver caused the white tip to release its hold and retreat several meters, giving Alex precious seconds to pull himself fully onto the debris. The shark continued circling throughout the night, occasionally making half-hearted approaches before eventually disappearing at dawn. A search and rescue helicopter spotted Alex 18 hours later, dehydrated and severely injured but alive. The rescue team later reported that they had almost missed him, as his makeshift raft blended nearly perfectly with other floating debris scattered across the search area. The deep puncture wounds in his leg required extensive surgery and months of rehabilitation. Doctors removed several shark teeth, fragments embedded deep in the muscle tissue. An infection from the contaminated seawater prolonged his recovery significantly. Physical therapy sessions stretched over 8 months as he worked to regain full mobility in his damaged leg. The psychological impact proved equally challenging. Alex experienced recurring nightmares about the attack and developed severe anxiety around large bodies of water. Counseling sessions helped him process the trauma, though he admitted that the sound of waves still triggered immediate panic responses years later. Alex never returned to sea, instead finding work at a land-based engineering firm where his maritime experience proved valuable in designing offshore equipment.